Hi there, my name is Ewan Nicholson. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Remembering Love. This is the channel where we look at the subject of healing childhood trauma and all the things in and around that subject. So if that's something you're interested in, click in the subscribe button and you'll get all the updates as they come out. Now today I'm making a bold claim, which is if you're serious about healing your childhood trauma, you should really develop a sitting meditation practice. And that's a bold claim, but I intend to back it up, and I intend to inspire you to start today if you haven't started, or if you are starting, to stick at it, and I'm going to give you the reasons as to why. And this is really a why video as opposed to kind of what and how and the way you should do it. There's a lot of stuff on that. I've got some stuff on my own channel, but I want to create an understanding or support you in understanding of why this is so critical. And what I'd like to feel is by the end of this video, you will be inspired and you'll be very clear as to kind of why this is necessary and what the act of meditation does in regard to healing childhood trauma. Because the wonderful thing about a meditation practice is we can start today. It doesn't cost anything. It's immediately available, and the impact and effect take shape straight away. So let me go through why having a meditation practice is something really critical and fundamental if you're really serious on this journey of healing childhood trauma. Now, to do that, I'm going to explain one of the fundamental legacies of childhood trauma, like what it leaves us with. And I'm going to take you through how meditation practice will start to gradually, subtly, slowly, little by little, start to undo and discharge that legacy. So let's have a look. When we suffer from childhood trauma, on a fundamental level, a number of different things happen. And to begin with, what occurs is if we look at, and I can just take you through my own personal lived experience, which I'm sure will have some crossover with yours, which is childhood trauma is enduring psychological and emotional and sometimes physical pain during our childhood in such a way that it has a lasting imprint on our adult life. So we go through certain things as kids, and those things are so impactful and so profound that when we get to adults, they're still affecting us in a number of different ways. And that feeling is we go through pain, and one of the ways we deal with that psychological, emotional, physical pain is we develop mechanisms and tools to adapt, cope, and handle that pain better. Now, often for many of us, those adaptation mechanisms that worked in childhood, as we move into our adulthood, start to become redundant, or they start to kind of become their own problems. But there's a fundamental feeling that accompanies childhood trauma, which is this feeling of, I find it very difficult to be with myself. I find it very difficult to be with my pain. And when we're very little, we don't have the mechanisms, we don't have the cognitive or psychological capacity to understand what's going on and to develop healthy ways to be with what's going on. We just feel it. So shame's a really good example of that, where bad things happen to us and we feel like we must be bad. We internalize, we carry the shame of someone else, and we feel like we're bad. And it's just not a very nice feeling to have, to feel like I don't really like myself. I fundamentally maybe hate myself. So there's this real discomfort with self. And then there's these mechanisms we develop or habits or behaviors that try and move us away from this fundamental discomfort with self. And what you start to understand when it comes to meditation is meditation in its essence is the practice of relearning to be with oneself. And when I talk about a meditation practice, I'm not talking about going into a Buddhist monastery and meditating 8 hours a day and moving into some state of bliss. I'm talking about meditation as the practice and process of spending regular time being able to be present with what arises in oneself. Physical sensations, emotions, thoughts and feelings, the content of our consciousness, the content of our lived experience, the practice of being present with that experience, what it is to be me, what am I feeling right now? That is what a meditation practice is, the practice of being with oneself. And what we see is the legacy of our childhood trauma is we've developed very elaborate, sophisticated, and ingrained habits that are the opposite of that. The practice of not being with myself. All day I'm in the practice of getting away from myself, whether it's through disassociation, whether it's through addiction, whether it's through people pleasing. There could be all these different things, which is the art and practice of getting away from this discomfort that I feel. So something occurs in my environment and I feel like my internal sense of shame is triggered, and then I go binge eat. So here is the discomfort, like this feeling of I don't like this feeling of being with myself, and here's this action that tries to kind of cover up that feeling. And why a meditation practice can be so critical and so healing in the process of moving through and healing our childhood trauma is we are doing the opposite of that. Even if it's just 1 minute a day, we are practicing this process of what is it to be with myself? What does it feel like just to be present with what arises? And that, for someone who's been through childhood trauma, ends up being a real gift, because there are two things that happen with this process. The starting process, when you get into healing your childhood trauma, you start therapy, and maybe you think, I'm going to develop this kind of mindfulness practice. And to start with, for most of us, for me in particular, it wasn't very comfortable. It wasn't like, this is easy and this comes very smoothly. I do have some content and videos on that process of getting through that initial discomfort. But that discomfort is like, when this isn't familiar ground. We've spent a lifetime trying to get away from ourselves, and now suddenly we're returning to ourselves. Of course, it feels uncomfortable. But in the practice, we learn to be with that. We learn to adjust to that. We learn to start feeling like, I can be comfortable with my discomfort. I can be present with my discomfort. So that's the first thing that happens. There's this sense, and that's why we don't often enter inner states of bliss and quietude to begin with. We just are faced with what's already there, but now we're kind of looking at it. But what happens with a meditation practice, as we stick that out, as we persist, as we have a kind of discipline and we learn ways to do that, then something extraordinary happens. Little by little, bit by bit, we get a glimpse of what's beneath that. That as we stick with this process of being with ourselves, we suddenly have this lived and visceral experience that myself can be a source of ease and peace, as opposed to a constant source of anguish, stress, and fear. And that is just an amazing experience, even if it's just a glimpse to start with, where there's this feeling of we're sitting and we're being with ourselves. It could be 10 minutes, 5 minutes, and all of a sudden we feel like, I feel relaxed. I feel like I like being here. I like being with myself. And all of a sudden the self becomes a source of serenity rather than anguish and stress. And I use the analogy of often it's like panning for gold, where you're in the creek and you're doing the pan, and most of what you're getting is dirt and grit and stones, but occasionally like a little nugget of gold comes through. And that's what happens with our practice. We're practicing, and a lot of what we're getting is just the stuff that arises. But somewhere in that, there's a little nugget of gold, and then maybe there's a little diamond, and then there's an emerald, and little by little, these jewels appear that are kind of gifts from ourselves to ourselves. And then it really gets interesting, because suddenly our practice becomes a refuge. Ourselves becomes, rather than something we're escaping from, something we're returning to. And for anyone with a history of childhood trauma, the capacity or experience of feeling like I am the source of peace rather than I am the source of distress is fundamental in that healing process. It's a fundamental rewiring and re-understanding of what it is to be ourselves. And that's where I would make the bold claim that if you're really serious about healing childhood trauma, you want to really seriously consider a sitting practice. And there is a lot of stuff out there on different traditions, different things you can do. And on one level, I wouldn't get too caught on which tradition I follow, how do I do it. Just get started. It is free. Capitalism yet has to monetize that, and though there are attempts to it, you can do it. You can do a minute a day. You can do 10 minutes a day. You can start today. You don't have to wait. There'll be no right time to start your sitting practice. You can start with a minute today, and then you have a minute tomorrow, and you build up to 2 minutes and 3 minutes and 5, and little by little, it just gets easier and you get accustomed to it. But committing yourself to a sitting practice is committing yourself to the process of, I can experience myself as a source of serenity. And look, you won't get that the first time you sit. I get that. I mean, maybe you will if you're lucky, but most of us doesn't come like that. But I can guarantee if you stick at it and you persist, little by little, you will eventually have that experience of myself as a source of sanctuary, myself as a source of peace. And that is so healing and so profound and so beautiful. And it's so fundamental in this healing process. And it's so accessible. It's not something that you have to have years of therapy to achieve. It's not something you have to pay thousands of dollars and go on a course for. It's not something you have to travel to India to get. It's available here and now, today. So if you're on this process of this journey of healing childhood trauma and you really feel like, I really want to do this, this is something you can start, and this is something that is really within your reach. So look, I hope this has made sense. I hope this has resonated with you. I have some other videos on the process of meditation you can look that might support you in this process. If you've got any questions about meditation itself or a sitting practice, please put them in the comments below. I would love to sort of look and answer those to the best of my ability. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. I put out as much stuff as I can, as regular as I can. Please take care of yourself, and bye-bye.